Okay, now it is recording, and now I'll do the, again, sorry about this. It happened, I didn't record some very important meetings we had because I get carried away by talking, and then I forget to reactivate it. And now, okay, New York rising again. Okay. All right, so we saw the first picture. We move forward. I was talking about twisting, and we'll come back to this subject. As you can see, and it is a fashion already. Many architects employ it, and some of the most important architects today twist, twist, twist. And this to me shows a crisis in a disbelief or a diluted belief in prismatic, undisturbed conditions. And I see it as some kind of a crisis of reason. And this is a reaction where you modify, you distort, you twist a prism that otherwise might seem too serene. It could also be an expression of some kind of pessimism, that we don't believe any longer in the workings of reason alone. Of course, we had deconstruction, which manifested that disbelief in its own way, but the twisting is an interesting aspect today. So we'll return to this. There you see in the image here on the left, the new World Trade Center built by, not by Lipsky, he won the competition, but it was David Child from SOM. Not only twisting, but you also have a pair of twisted towers, and this is another interesting leitmotif that we are confronted with, so to speak, these days. Maybe in the unconscious, the subconscious, or the subliminal mind of architecture, or the community of architects, the World Trade Center, the former World Trade Center, is still present. So maybe here I speculate, of course, maybe wrongly, but you have two towers which are embracing, holding each other, and also contorted. So maybe an appropriate paradigm for New York City in the post-September 11 period of time. And the contortions, the twisting is to be seen also inside. Now, Terform, which is an interesting architecture office, it's a non-for-profit kind of organization, in a way, an avant-garde enterprise. They don't work for man, for human beings. They work for insects, if you can believe it. They do an architecture that is like this one. It's an experiment, of course. It's in a way an installation, a pavilion. But the concern is not with the human beings, but with what is outside of the human beings. Insects, animals, bushes, you name it. And of course, they struggle financially because they depend on donations with these kind of preoccupations. But I chose to show it because it does show a significant change in our concerns, that we are already talking about the post-Anthropocene, a post-man new era, because indeed the human being disturbed nature, disturbed the order, the climatic order even. And now we somehow try to reconsider and to become more aware of what is outside of us. So the human being perhaps is not perceived any longer as the center or the shepherd of being, of existence. It's a shift that is taking place, and now there are just maybe, isolated, suggestions of this, but it seems to be, I mean, it would have been inconceivable even just some years ago that a team of architects would dedicate themselves to studying insects. I mean, Ernst Neufert would have remained without a job, because obviously his manual of architecture or of the architect is totally irrelevant to the life of the insects or animals. Now you see a building by Frank Gehry, who had to build in New York City as well. It was a must. You probably know these towers. I don't think they are the best works by him, but I chose to show it because it's still Frank Gehry, and he still problematizes the placid box or the placid prism by these fluctuations, these fluidities on the facade. He still had to conform with a kind of verticality that is almost unavoidable in New York City, but he problematizes it through these waves, architectural waves, if I could call them so. Another symptom that unreason, or yeah, if we could call it so, unreason is making its way onto the works of reason. And you could even almost call it the revenge of Bernini, because you probably know that Frank Gehry was inspired by the great Baroque Roman artist Bernini. So, of course, he is not the only one, but even here we have a form of twisting. Even here we have a critical positioning vis-a-vis the rational box or the rational prism. There is also the Agua Tower in Chicago by Jeannie Gang, the studio gang, which also brought fluidity into the reasonable or rational box. And there are other architects as well. Med architects also built the two towers, the Marilyn Monroe towers in Canada, also twisted and with fluidities that would have been inconceivable maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago. But this is Frank Gehry. It was built a few years ago, but look at the facade. This is it is an attempt at implementing a Baroque mentality into a city which, in a certain way, is Baroque, but in a very different way. Baroque art or Baroque architecture per se, as we encounter it in Europe, is not easily found in Manhattan. But in a modern interpretation, here we have these buildings. Too bad that actually the silhouette, the perimeter line of the building is roughly still of a prism. So you could say that maybe these fluidities are more of a cosmetical order than but the constraints in New York City are probably very, very stringent. So that's what he was able to do. Now, a firm that is very successful now, dealers Scofidio and Renfro. The first two I actually knew. Scofidio was a professor at Cooper Union in New York, a very good architecture school. The only school in the United States that I know of where you didn't have to pay tuition, but you had to pass through a difficult exam. So, talents and people with a certain level of intelligence got in. Dealer was his student, and then they fell in love, and then they began to have increasing success. And Renfro is the partner who came afterwards. The amount of works they have to do needed perhaps 3 partners, not just 2. This is a building that attempts even this building attempts to break the box, to contribute to the life of the city and the life of the street by opening up on one side. Essentially, it is a box which is broken on the short elevation, the narrow elevation, and then the staircase becomes actually a public architectural event and space. It becomes, even an auditorium on the floors at the bottom, and then other spaces. In other words, it's a hybrid architecture. They try to destroy the idea that a staircase is just a staircase. Here you have the platforms between the ramps that become other spaces for other functions. So I think it's a legitimate attempt, and it opens up, and you can see behind. It's kind of a regular box, architectural box, but as it approaches the street, it opens up. So it shows its visceral truth in a way, if we can say so. They are adventurous, and of course it pays off, because in a competitive society, if you take risks, yes, you might lose, but you could also attract attention. And if you are lucky a little bit, you could have the chance to build buildings that require courage. I mean, if you compare this building to the ones on the left and the ones on the right, you can see what a difference. I mean, they are sophisticated architects, they're very involved with academia. Diller was, I think, the director of architecture program at Princeton for many years. Scofidio taught, and they both taught at Cooper Union. So we are dealing here with a New York elite, so to speak, in architectural terms. Now, Stephen Hall, who was our guest, we had a chance 2 weeks ago to have him participate on one of the first Zoom talks. Here, he came to pay homage to his friend who died, Lebia Suds, who died in 2012. Also present 2 weeks ago was Wolf Prix from Vienna. They didn't say much, but they were present. And I was grateful because of them, 250 people or so showed up to these Zoom meetings. And this is the function. A Campbell Sports Center in the Bronx, I think it is. It's a typical Stephen Hall building in a way. Well, I shouldn't say typical, because his buildings are not, and he even avoids what is called signature architecture. Although, if you are familiar with his work, you do see certain elements which are, belong to him. But it's true, he is not a signature architect per se, and he reinvents himself with every program. You will also see a library that was just finished very recently in Queens by him. In this building as well, you see this attempt to break the box, to bring the stair outside. So there is an intermediate space between the inside of the building and the outside of the building. So this transitional space is important because it connects the building with what is outside of it. And I would say this is also true at the level of our own lives, that introversion has its qualities, but also it is important to open up to other people, to society, to life, to the street, and so on. As you know, Stephen Hall begins his day with drawing himself with watercolors and studying, through various sketches, ideas. He explores ideas through these watercolors. He probably has a large collection of of such watercolors. And it is amazing considering how much he builds, that he still so-called finds time. He makes time to draw with his own hand, to make these watercolors and explore the anatomy of the building and the various ideas. I admire this. Much lesser architects don't do this, but he does it. And it's not a little thing, I think. And you see the duality, mind-body, again, mind-body. You know, this is not just an athletic center, but it is a building that tries to bring together the mind with the body. And this holistic approach to not just architecture, but life, I think it is valuable. Now, Jean Nouvel. Well, Jean Nouvel also built, now he probably finished a skyscraper that belongs to the Museum of Modern Art. But I will start with an apartment building, this one. Across the street is a building by Frank Gehry. I like more the building by Nouvel. I like, you see here is a different kind of opposing in a way the straight, predictable regularity of the rational box, because the facade is pixelated, the windows are so very different, and it's actually a puzzle, you know, it's a puzzle. So it shows in a different way the problematization of reason, of the Cartesian mentality and the Cartesian box. What a difference now between the building at the bottom and what he did behind. It's also a quest for complexity, because it's true, today's life is very complex. Of course, you could situate yourself in opposition and opposed to the complexity of today's life, you know, some kind of a refuge, a fortress of peace, but it depends. I guess valuable architecture could be done with an opposite mentality as well. Although I think that somehow to belong to your time and to your place, you cannot ignore the specificities that define that time and that place. He's not a deconstructivist per se. Jean Nouvel never was and probably never will. But there is here in this fragmentation some kind of so-called, with quotation marks, deconstruction. This fracturing, this culture, this aesthetic culture of fragments, of fractals. Now this is the tower built by him, and unfortunately I don't have very, I have pictures from 1 year ago when it was during the construction. It's a Gothic tower. It's very surprising to me that Jean Nouvel proposed what I would call a Gothic tower. It's a modern building, of course, but it has a silhouette. And I would even say some kind of the psychology of the building, it seems to me rather Gothic. I mean, look, if you compare it to the buildings around it, you understand that it's a different, even a different conception of what architecture is or could be or should be, what life is or could be or should be. He had big troubles to have it built, because for many years he did a project, I think more than 10 years ago, and the construction was being postponed and postponed and postponed. I guess he needed all kinds of signatures. In the end, they started the construction, and you can see it's quite a tall building, and it's done now. I mean, all kinds of you know, famous architects built these towers. You'll see some more very soon. But I like very much this building by Jean Nouvel. You see the structure. Again, here we are dealing with the same phenomenon. The disbelief in the predictable relationship between column and beam, between you know, a reason that is too self-confident, and the reality of a city, and the realities of the art of building, which are so different today. So in a different way than Frank Gehry, for example, he problematizes the box, the prism. He still believes, yeah, in the straight line, but he also believes in diagonals, and these diagonals are almost capriciously ornamenting the facades, which are also themselves have deviations from the pure vertical. During construction, it was built. Maybe even the grand opening took place already. You can see the Empire State Building, and then his building. So this is the structure. I like it. It's an embroidered structure. It is embroidered, but with a kind of embroidery that shows in a way the almost the dilemmas of our time. And it is, the structure becomes almost ornamental, and this is something worth thinking about, that we are in this at this time reconsidering the relationship between structure and ornament, and capriciousness as well, because certain decisions here probably initially were of a aesthetic order, and so there is a capriciousness sometimes that is beneficial, because it brings surprise in even in the structure of the building. It makes me, although that it's a different architectural language, but somehow it makes me think this image to the Russian constructivists, the idealists, the utopians at the beginning of the 20th century. It's almost a paradox, because here we have hardcore capitalism, you know, kind of intersecting or meeting different kind of ideologies from more than 100 years ago, or about 100 years ago, and in the Soviet Union or Russia. We'll see another very interesting skyscraper built not far away from this by Shop. Very, very, very slim and very, very, very tall. I like this building by Jean Nouvel. Stephen Hall Library. Now we come back to Stephen Hall. This is a library that opened very recently, and it provoked some scandal because apparently they ignore, the architect and the beneficiary, the access of the people with disabilities. But the building is interesting, at least aesthetically. Here it was still during the construction, but Stephen Hall very interestingly made his openings into the box. Unfortunately, the entrance into the building, I think, is problematic. It's too, it's just a little door almost, you could say, without, so it's a little bit strange, but I don't know if I have a picture so you can see what I'm talking about. But it's very interesting how he creates these openings in the facade, which are obviously plastic gestures. They are you know, they show an aesthetic freedom that maybe, you know, I don't know, Juan Miró exhibited in his art, but, you know, architects don't do it very often. But why not? This is a public building. You actually can see the door I was telling you about here. It's a door, but it's, I don't know. Anyway, but I admire these large windows, these openings that probably are connected with the public spaces inside, mainly the circulations. I know there is a stair that you can walk from the bottom of the building all the way up, and I imagine these large openings are connected with, just like in the case of the building by Diller and Scofidio, the openings are connected with also with circulation. Watercolors again that connect with like the children's carpet, and this is I like this very much, that Stephen Hall finds time. Well, he makes time for these watercolors, so his artistic side is continuously present and active. That's him writing something on on a panel there during the construction. What is even more amazing, that this man who builds a lot, who draws a lot, who I understood wakes up in the morning, starts to paint, also found time to become a father for the first time, I think at 72 or 71, and he became, now he's to become again a father, 73 or 74. It's unbelievable. Anyway, yeah, he was sued, and also the beneficiary by I don't know what organizations in New York, because they didn't provide access for disabled persons, and this is a big issue. But the building is very interesting, and the critic of the New York Times considers it one of the most interesting buildings and significant architectures built in New York the past, I don't know, 10, 20 years. Here he is in his office with Zaha Hadid. I was once, I don't think he moved, because I remember the shelves, this metallic shelving system. I was in his office many years ago. He was not yet so famous, and I think he even lived there. And I remember seeing on the shelf two books that attracted my attention. One was The Geometry of Art and Life by Matila Gika, and the other one was The Sacred and the Profane by Mircea Eliade. But what disturbed me a little bit was that in his toilet, he had in front of the toilet a little drawing by Aldo Rossi. Why did he place it there? I do not know, but that's where it was. Santiago Calatrava, he had to be there in New York as well. Of course, the transportation hub, which is an emphatic, almost flamboyant celebration of an optimism which seems a little bit almost out of place. But this is the techno-mannerism or techno-expressionism of Calatrava. He repeats over and over again a certain kind of doing architecture. And some people actually consider that the building is threatening, although it is white. But these emphatic wings are maybe too emphatic in the post September 11 times. Anyway, it is Santiago Calatrava. He also built a Greek Orthodox church, and you'll see it soon, also not far away from this transportation hub. Yes, it is impressive, but when you think about, in the building has this flamboyance, this excessiveness, which I don't know. We can talk about it. It is impressive, of course, as an engineering piece, but in terms of its meaning, maybe it is lacking. After all, what is the big reason for this big gesture of immense pride? You know, the eagle or the bird in flight, or I don't think our times permit for an optimism of such a magnitude expressed so flamboyantly in architecture. After all, it's a transportation hub. It's not a cathedral. It's not, it's not aspiring towards God or something. It's a transportation hub. This does not mean, of course, that a transportation hub has to be you know, pale and prosaic. But on the other hand, should it actually recall a cathedral? I don't know. I have my reservations from this point of view vis-a-vis Calatrava, although of course he's an important architect. I'm not even commenting on the cost of this building, and which could have been avoided, while so many people in New York City and worldwide have nothing to eat. I mean, yes, I know aesthetics have a hard time sometimes to marry themselves with ethical problems, but the excessive of our consumerism that could bring us to ruin should be questioned, I think. This is the Greek Orthodox Church, also designed by him, and as you know, it's hard to please the Greek Orthodox religion architecturally. He tried, and that's what he got. This is what he did. It's still I mean, I don't even know if I could say it's a Calatrava building, but it's a Greek Orthodox building that happened to be designed by Calatrava. It kind of looks more interesting when it was during the construction. It's a static building, of course, because you know, the religion almost asked for something like this. In a certain way, there is more exuberance and more aspiration to so-called the absolute or the infinite in the transportation hub than in the church. Yes, Calatrava, Greek Orthodox Church in New York City. Thomas Hedorick, the designer from England, who is very successful in the sense that. Pardon? I don't hear you.
Kiska pack?
10 pack geranium that is sold as one thing, 1 unit. 1 unit with 10 pieces of geranium.
You want to try that?
Sorry.
He कैसे geranium है?
What can we do so we don't hear the background noise?
It's mangaya ek. Butternut squash ek.
Could you please turn off the microphone? Thank you. So Thomas Hedorick, he had to arrive in New York City too, and he did something provocative, but also questionable. Well, I'll explain myself. I like very much this picture, but unfortunately, this idea to bring the labyrinth and the contortions of present day life and society from outside of the structure seem contrived, and it became actually an object, an architectural object, and you'll see it here, of very large dimensions. On the right side here, it's a structure built by Diller and Scofidio and Renfro. This one is an interesting building too, because it has a part that moves, but this one in the center is Thomas Hedorick, who didn't study architecture. He's a designer, but he's very, very busy now erecting buildings in Singapore, in New York, in London, everywhere. Now look, it's kind of, I don't know, I'm not very impressed by this structure, but probably the experience, I still hear a background noise. I don't know where it comes from. Anyway, it was very interesting during construction, and I hope I have here some pictures showing the big segments that were manufactured at a different site and brought in. This is a huge building to be explored by foot on these interlocking, intermingled stairs. But from the outside, it seems deterministic. It seems though rigid. It's like I like it when it is disordered like this during construction, but that's not how it is in the final image. It's almost like some kind of architectural Christmas tree upside down. but there are still possibilities to take interesting pictures like this one. And it must be it is probably an interesting experience to walk up these stairs if you have strong legs and see the city from these platforms. Here is the man with his structure. It is again to be seen and to be witnessed this simple fact: if you take risks, you might lose, but you could also win. If you don't take risks, you lose for sure. So he took risks, and look at him now. He is one of the most busy architects in the world because he had the courage to assert a certain vision about what he did, and it paid off in his case. Herzog and de Meuron, of course, they had to be here too, with this building on the right. These New Yorkers, they don't care too much about earthquakes. They don't have earthquakes, so cantilevered parts of the building are welcomed. It's not a new form of aesthetics. Other people play with in this way too. They are not the only ones, but this is their building. And it is a departure from the plain boxes surrounding it. What disturbs me a little, and not that they care too much that I am disturbed by this, but I do have to say something. To own or to rent, I imagine they don't even rent, but to own an apartment in this building is immensely expensive, immensely expensive. In Manhattan, you cannot rent a studio with maybe under $2,000 a month. And so, you know, we are dealing here with a financial elite that is able to acquire these spaces. But what about the many who have a big trouble to rent a space? We are not even mentioning, you know, buying a place. This fact that the stars of today very rarely address the problem of social housing, and I'm not a social worker, but I do admire the first moderns at the beginning of the 20th century who also had social concerns. They also had aesthetical concerns, and they were innovators, but they also had, some of them, interest in you know, so-called the common man, the common people. Not so often the stars of today. I do not know of social housing. It happened that Herzog and de Meuron did something in Vienna, but very unskillfully. But Frank Gehry, did he ever do social housing? Did Zaha Hadid do social housing? Did Rem Koolhaas do social housing? No. They stay away from you know, the difficulties that such a program is connected with. So I think this is a minus, but we still have to acknowledge what they offer, because they are interesting architects and they build interesting buildings. Well, this one maybe is a little bit less interesting than others, but it's a firm that is not to be ignored, as you know. But there is some kind of you know, indulgence in the financial riches of the few that disturbs me a little bit. You know, yes, we are playful. Yes, we are hedonistically oriented. Yes, we celebrate technology in all its glory, but with what price and for whom? I mean, you can only imagine how much it costs the penthouse in this building, but not just the penthouse. Any apartment is not meant for, you know, so-called ordinary people. So there is, in a way, some kind of a superficiality and frivolousness in these architectural gestures, which ignore, I would say, a large segment of the population. This mundane architecture I find problematic, and it surprises me that architects so skilled are not a little more reticent about this, or address problems that are not just about vivacious architecture, or you call it as you wish. You see here in this picture on the right, the New World Trade Center by David Child, and then the tower, Herzog and de Meuron. I mean, many people in these buildings, these brick buildings, live here. They struggle in very small spaces. I know because I live there. I know what it means to pay a rent in one of these small spaces. And then here come Herzog and de Meuron and build a rather arrogant tower that celebrates the power of money, to which have access just a few, actually. And mainly who? Speculators on Wall Street and all kinds of people involved in financial transactions. Certainly not blue collar workers. Certainly not the nurses and even the doctors who, fought the pandemic and so on. So the capitalism, as it is manifesting itself in New York City and in other many parts of the world, I think has to be questioned. The inside, in a way, shows the emptiness of an existential horizon that is conditioned by money. I mean, it's almost cynical, actually, because it's a very, very, very expensive building, but the look seems to be almost arte povera, unadorned walls, cold concrete aesthetics, some kind of misleading minimalism. Because actually, to live in this building, you cannot have an empty pocket, and you cannot be at the financial level a minimalist at all. And then this ubiquitous, health club, or I don't know. To be honest with you, and forgive my harsh word, but they sicken me. This, it's we take the car like it was said in the United States. You take the car to go to the health club in order to ride the bicycle which goes nowhere. So it's absurd. We pollute the air with our cars, and then we find refuge in the health club in order to ride a bicycle, like you see the background on the right side, which goes nowhere. It is totally absurd. And this preoccupation, eugenics, with the healthy body, the muscles, it's so superficial, really. It only shows actually the emptiness of today's life, because yes, you make money, yes, you buy the penthouse, and then what do? You descend in the health club, and then you begin to activate your muscles in a kind of a futile and ridiculous way. I don't know about these so-called well-being centers, and then the swimming to cleanse oneself of one's sins. I don't know. Maybe I'm now in a mood of criticizing certain things, but the paradigms that I see here externalized architecturally leave me cold. Although I might contradict myself, because as you can see, I'm not cold at all. That is, I'm not indifferent. Maybe I'm jealous. No, I'm not jealous. I don't think this luxe calme volupté, to use Charles Baudelaire's words, is such a great addition to our life, to which in fact very few people have access. It's a place of privilege. And you have here again very gray and very misleading, actually. Where are the primary colors? Where is the joie de vivre, chromatically speaking? Now we have this, because in a way the psychology of the creators works in maybe predictable way. You try to oppose the opulence of the buildings through these apparently morose aesthetics. So you give the impression that there is no opulence here, but actually there is. Very much so. You cannot even dream of entering this building or living there because the prices are immense. Now, PS1 experiments. This is an interesting place. PS1 is a former public school in Queens, which was transformed into a art center, a contemporary art center, and they have very interesting exhibitions. And that's where even young architects manifest themselves through all kinds of experiments. And you'll see some of them now. And some of the architects who began there, who started to display their works there, became later on so-called famous architects. This is a Young Architects Pavilion in 2017. So they invest in so-called research, in experiments, and sometimes they build them. How computer-aided organic architecture could change the city of the future. And you have this structure which I used in the invitational text that I sent out. I like this building. I like the fact that high technology is used to kind of connect with a primitive, so-called primitive form of building. So in a way, we could use the words of Su Fujimoto, primitive future here. So you have a brick that was created artificially through sophisticated technology and compounds, all kinds of, I don't know the technical data precisely, but you can find out about it on the web. And then the architecture itself is both new and very old. And I like this sort of meeting between the so-called future and the so-called past.
Dan, these are mushroom bricks.
They are what?
They're mushroom bricks.
And could you, if you are so kind, could you tell us something about the mushroom bricks?
Yeah, it's made with they're organic bricks, and it's a very good response to a temporary pavilion that's there for a couple of months because they began to grow some mold. They wouldn't have lasted very long. They're actually organic.
Are they? Because I read that, unless I didn't read carefully, that it's a very special, so they are organic.
Yeah, it's an organic process, like similar to a mushroom.
So they are called mushroom bricks, yes?
Yes.
And I guess the word mushroom comes exactly from the fact that they are organic. No?
Absolutely. I'll try and pull something up as we speak.
Thank you. I would appreciate. Also, you said it's perishable, that it doesn't last for a long time. It's strange. It means I didn't read very carefully because I was sure I have to be more careful about this because I thought it was a brick, that it was created artificially, but I didn't notice this aspect that it is artificially created, but from organic matter. It's not like the typical brick made of clay, is it?
No, it's not a typical brick.
So is this material used in construction in other places?
No, this was very experimental.
Ah, so you do know about this specific building? That
Yeah, absolutely. My colleagues did this in New York.
are your colleagues? I'm astonished about the workings of change. I almost expect now to say I did it. I mean, not me, but you.
No, not this one.
Not this one, but you use this brick yourself in your work?
No, but the idea here is, maybe this brick could function for 8 weeks and then decompose. How tall can you go? How much risk? What if? So it's interesting. It's very circular economy, organic. There's a lot of interesting directions.
So you said it lasts for just 8 weeks?
No, this was the idea. Like, what can you do? You have a function. It's an 8-week function, right? So you have to build something. Hopefully, it's not doesn't cost too much, not too difficult to build, but you get a lot of bang for the buck. It's an interesting installation, and then 8 weeks later, you have to take it apart and get rid of it. So what do you do?
Yes. Thank you. It always helps to have Bruce in the audience because I mean I admire this. After we met, that we need a knowledge of a good engineer, and Bruce, you seem to know about the newest things in a way. I mean, this was from 2017. Maybe this brick was so-called invented earlier. I don't know, but the structure was built in 2017. I'm a little bit nostalgic because this PS1, you see now it belongs to the Museum of Modern Art. So it's almost like a branch of the Museum of Modern Art, but in Queens. Maybe you don't believe me, but I was the first architect to show work at PS1 in 1985 or 86. I was given a corridor on PS1, and it was an experiment. There was a young curator who said, Dan, could you please do quickly an exhibition? So I did an exhibition, and I even have some photographs, but not on this presentation, called Architecture and Consciousness. No, Searching for Wholeness. And I painted the walls of the corridor in the 4 primary colors, red, green, yellow, and blue, or maybe it should have been, but I have a problem there with Newton, that the opposite of blue is not yellow, but it's kind of an orange. So opposite colors, red and green, and then almost opposite yellow and blue. And on each color, I placed different kinds of projects of mine. Anyway, yeah, it was at PS1, but PS1 at that time was not part of the Museum of Modern Art, and it didn't have the glamour that it has now. I like this structure because it has this quality, and I like the fact that it was probably a computer technology that was used, but also seems handmade. And I like the so-called imperfections, and it seems alive. It seems human somehow. So this is the mushroom brick that Bruce mentioned as being called a mushroom. I admire though the restlessness of the New Yorkers. This city that never sleeps. The city that never sleeps is continuously provoking the world with the new experiments. So it's almost like a paradox. At its highest, capitalism also paradoxically turns almost against itself and becomes playful. And anyway. Could very well be a chapel, or I'm sure if Peter Zumthor built it, he would have been applauded for this. This was just a pavilion at PS1. This is another work also at PS1. Again, the return of the ornament, which cannot be ignored. Another structure built there. You can see even here, this is a rendering, but you can see the breaking of the box is the monster within, so to speak, who tries to break up the cube. It's not literally a cube, but you understand. It almost makes me think about what Tadao Ando said, that he wanted to do an architecture that inside was like Piranesi and outside like Joseph Albers. So here you have the beast within who tries to explode. In fact, I showed yesterday a building by Kop Himmelblau that is very similar to the beast within, so to speak, that we see here. That mini opera space that Kop Himmelblau built. Hernan Diaz Alonso, who now runs SciArc in Los Angeles, who was also the director of the program Excessive at Institute of Architecture in Vienna. He's eccentric and he's Argentinian, and he runs now, he's responsible for a very famous school where actually our guest tonight, Bruce, he taught there. So maybe he could tell us more about SciArc. I only knew Neil Denari, who was the director of the school for a number of years. But now it's Hernan Diaz Alonso. He built this thing, also a PS1. He's obsessed by Maya, this software that allows for such fluidities.
Dan, I engineered this structure.
You did? Incredible. Bruce, you continue to amaze me.
The incredible thing here, Dan, is that the ideas in exploring with Hernan this project were amazing, and we were never able to take them further. Like you do something like this experimentally, and it creates ideas where you could multiply the scale by 100. But the ideas are still there. They haven't been. Maybe I can share them at some point because I think they're really interesting ideas.
You continue to amaze me, Bruce. I mean, I really didn't expect this. Yes, I think one day, or if not now, perhaps you could tell us more about this, about you know, the ideas that you worked with building this, and you know, your collaboration with Hernan and so on. I don't know. It's up to you. I can go on, but I'm very happy that that we met, and I think you have a lot of things, interesting things to say. And so please consider making another presentation. Maybe we'll invite also Hernan Diaz Alonso one day. I do send messages to him, but he doesn't respond. Anyway. Again, the New Yorkers. I love these New Yorkers, you know, who, you know, these are common people. They probably, most of them can't afford to live in the skyscraper by Herzog and de Meuron, but they are, I don't know, this diversity, this hybrid society, you know, people coming from all over the world. I live there, so I know what I'm talking about. It's something, I think, very moving in this almost difficult to conceive togetherness. I look at this and I say, you know, here is Bruce. He's on Zoom now, and he did without you, this thing would not have been. I mean, I don't think Hernan would have been capable of.
It's not that complicated, but you know, in competing for the work, I sent one of my guys from the New York office to the interview, and I think having Arab sit there, nod their head, say, "Yeah, we got it. We'll do it. It'll be on budget. It'll work. Don't worry." It's okay. But you know, in the end, they cantilever a bit, but it's not. There's nothing. There's no rocket science behind the structure here.
For me, it is, Bruce. Sorry to say it. I mean, and I think it's also for Hernan. I don't think he could have done it.
Oh, what's really interesting is the ideas that come out of these explorations, and I think that's part of. I would, you know, from my perspective, that's part of the purpose of PS1 is to instigate things, to test things, and then, you know, go out in the real world and do something big with it.
Yes. Yes, we'll see soon the works of Shop, and they also started at PS1, and I think I have images with a pavilion they did before they became the big firm they are now, with Greg Pasquarelli and his partners. But I know for you, you could say it's not a rocket science, but I don't know. Anyway, I'm glad that you think it's not such a big deal. To me, it's, I mean, even to draw it is not an easy matter. Shop, we arrive at Shop. Now, Shop are, the letters there are the initials of the members of the group. There are actually two friends and their wives, and then there is another one. There are 5 people, I think, but only 4 letters. Anyway, the last letter belongs to Pasquarelli. They all studied at Columbia University in New York, and Pasquarelli is probably the most innovative there, or although I am not sure, but I think so. Greg Pasquarelli, and they have now they built big buildings and not just big. So it's a very important firm in architecture. But this is a pavilion they built when they were very young. It happened that I actually, after they finished their studies at Columbia, I knew someone who was friends with them, and one evening we were invited to a party. They just rented an apartment on the east side of Manhattan, Lower East Side, and I remember they had a how do you call it, pool, this table where you play with balls. I don't know how it is called. Anyway, and they were very into using the computer to generate forms that actually appear very free and appear almost ad hoc and spontaneous, but behind them there was maybe scripting and programming. So this pavilion I admire because it's almost like achieving freedom within order, and there are numbers behind this playfulness, aesthetical playfulness. I think it's a good pavilion, and I actually I am sad a little bit that some explorations that went into this building were kind of left behind, but maybe it's explainable because they do now big commercial buildings, and maybe it's not so possible to have this kind of exploration at the level of high, large scale buildings. So shock. By the way, Greg Pasquarelli was asked maybe 1 or 2 years ago, what do you recommend young architects and students? And he said, on one hand, theory, history, philosophy, and on the other hand, the newest digital technologies, scripting and programming and so on. And I believe he's not far from what is needed to be done by maybe by anyone, but the young ones, those who begin working in architecture, perhaps should consider what he said. History, theory, philosophy, and on the other hand, meaning theory, the theory assumed in all its complexities, and then on the other hand, to know very well digital technologies. I wonder, Bruce, if you are still here with us, what do you think of this? Do you think it's crucial that the students and the young architects know how to operate, how to work digitally at very sophisticated levels?
Yeah, Dan, it's a really tough question because there's so much to learn. Like, you have to give something up to learn something new in the education. You can only put so much. You can't put 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag. It's just so. What do you give up? Like, do you give up some of the sketching courses? And when we talk about mind body, the digital is all mind, no body. And so we just need to be careful. I'm a little bit old school, so I'm really not the right person to ask.
Well, you don't seem to me too old school. After all, you did the engineering for this pavilion by Hernan Diaz Alonso.
15 years ago, right?
Yeah, but no,
a lot has changed, and I think I don't know if it's a new paradigm, but it's certainly stronger that there's the opportunity that young architects and engineers coming out of school can reverse mentor people like me that don't have the skills or the techniques to use these digital tools. I fear that there's too much intelligence, too much smartness in some of the scripting and not enough wisdom.
Now, Bruce, if you allow me, you said something extremely important, I think. And maybe we should just stop the presentation and just have a discussion, those of us who are here now, about this. So you said, in the scripting, there is too much smartness and not enough wisdom. And I remember what the great Romanian sculptor Brancusi said. He said, I adore the intelligent ones, but I despise the smart ones. And I'm very glad that you mentioned this, Bruce, and the way you said it. In simple terms, you touch upon a very important matter, I think, because, there is an obsession now in the world, and not just in the United States, with smartness, smartphones, smart cities. Everybody talks about smartness, but very few people talk about wisdom or talk about intelligence, and there is a difference between intelligence and smartness. And I think we should address this subject, because smartness, it is dragging us into superficiality and banality and even vulgarity, while true intelligence is connected with wisdom and maybe even with a sense of limits. I appreciate the modesty of Bruce. I think he knows more than he says it. But I think, yeah, we could talk about this. My first question about, the appropriateness or the need for knowing the newest technology derives from the fact that the schools of architecture here, they still study more than 2 years actually with the 2T square and the rectangle. So it's very hard to do a pavilion-like shop, not to speak about what Hernan Diaz Alonso did PS1 and Bruce helped him. How could you do that with the T-square and the rectangle? But maybe there is a wisdom that is worth talking about, even in that so-called turning one's head backwards. I admire the avant-garde. I thought I was part of it myself, but I also am affectionate towards a past which doesn't pass. I mean, didn't die and doesn't die. So anyway, this is maybe one day we should meet and talk about these issues without any kind of presentation. Just talk about these issues, because I think they are important. Anyway, I'll move forward. So this is
Yeah, I even mentioned the T-square yesterday, and I only have a few more minutes, but I just want to add a thought there, is that there's something wonderful about the T-square, is it forces you to use your body to create your design, not just your mind. So
okay.
what can we do with the body, especially when there's sort of I think there's a transition in the design process where when you're creating something in the beginning, it's very open, and you can use the computer a bit, but you should rely on other techniques like physical models and sketching and drawing, and then transition to more of the computer because the computer is very constricting. And well, like you said, we can get into this some other time. I have a lot of thoughts to share with this.
Yes, I am very, very curious and interested to have such a discussion, and will invite a larger community. And I'm very happy that this subject interests you. It is true. How do you bring the body into a work that is increasingly alienating the body? It's a very legitimate concern. Yes, we should come back to it, and very soon, and maybe several times. So the Berkeley Center also by shop. Bruce, please do not tell me that you also did a structure for this as well.
No, I had nothing to do with this, and I'm going to leave in about 2 minutes, no, 5 minutes. So I'm not going to interrupt you anymore, Dan.
No, your interventions are not interruptions. I wouldn't use this word. Thank you. Yeah, this is in Brooklyn. It's a big arena. Of course, the most interesting part is in the front of the building. This, canopy with a big hole in it. These towers are also by shop, and they are kind of interesting. It's almost like a commentary on the former World Trade Center. They are the so-called the dancing towers, and someone here expressed this belief that they were able to do this, to break the prism on the left and have that bridge between the two buildings, which are also, as you can see, a little bit sloping. So I imagine the engineering was, it's called the American Copper Buildings. I think it's a good work by them. If I'm not rushing into a statement here. Now, at least in these buildings, from what I read, they have a section of in both buildings where they also rent to people with lower income. But I guess those with a higher income, pay for those. But that's good. I think it's a more balanced situation where you have two groups of people, the privileged ones and the disadvantaged ones, kind of coming together and complementing each other in some way. I don't know. I don't want to idealize it because I have my own prejudices in a way against rampant capitalism. But it seems something good was happening here. And I don't know if the architects had a role in this, but I know that shop. I know Pasquarelli, and I know his wife, and I know the other people. I think they are not arrogant, and I think, although they build some of the most eccentric and expensive buildings in New York, I also think they have some sympathy or empathy for those less advantaged by destiny, let's say. Yes, with certain conditions of light, the buildings begin to show the value of copper. Now, this is a building by them, which is amazingly inefficient because it has a footprint very, very narrow. Look at it, it's very tall and very, very narrow. So it's almost like a rod, extremely tall and thin, and I just don't believe it that these they are still young.
Capital H.
Hello?
Capital.
Okay, so the building is facing Central Park. Somewhere here on the left side, John Lennon was shot to death. I think at 72nd Street or so on the west side of Central Park. Here is the notorious Central Park East. This is I even forgot how it is called. Anyway, this is the west side, this is the eastern side. And many times I cross this park, and it's a nice walk from one side to the other, going through the park. But it is advisable not to do it at night. You see the advertisings of capitalism, today's glass ceiling is tomorrow's first floor. Dare to dream. Well, the truth is dare to dream so we can get even richer. Because that advertising doesn't belong to the architects, but to the developers and the real estate people. I think here is just one apartment per floor, so you can imagine. You can imagine. I saw a building where Raphael Moneo was the design consultant, and I just didn't believe my eyes. One apartment was valued at 800 something million dollars. Can you believe it? I still don't believe it, although I saw it. And I kept looking at it, and I still don't believe it. Anyway, you see here clearly the positioning of this tower vis-a-vis Central Park and in general the city. It has actually ceramic tiles that are incorporated in the facade with a kind of interesting ornamental design. I learned that some of them began to fall, but it's okay. So there are ceramic tiles that adorn the facade. You see here, some parts fell off. So the facade is not simplistically just structure. It's also, it has an ornamental side that is present. Another tower in Brooklyn by them, maybe started to, this is still Manhattan, but is this one, which I think they are building now. This one here. Yeah, Brooklyn is getting tall, taller and taller itself. Soon it will be another Manhattan. When I lived there, they didn't have such buildings. No. Anyway, again, Diller and Scofidio on Renfro. The Shed. This is a building that is recent, and it's scandalous in a way. It's flamboyant. Structure and technology are involved, and at a scale maybe of old imperial Rome. You see behind the structure built by Thomas Heatherwick. Diller and Scofidio are also building now a skyscraper in the vicinity of these two structures. Now, you see it moves. It opens up and it amplifies the space. Maybe it doubles it. Look. But the scale is huge. This one we saw. That's the tower they are building now, the one in the background. This is also work by them, but it's older. It was, I don't know, built, I don't know, 15 years ago or so for the Lincoln Center. Also, at that time, they were just Diller and Scofidio. The New York High Line, which is very commented upon by also their work, they brought some nature and the walking through Manhattan, transforming this you know, railway into some kind of linear park. Interesting here in this picture, you see on the left, the provokers, the makers of pollution, and on the right, the revenge of the grass, in a way, nature and man. On the left, the man, on the right, nature. Or, to use the words of Frank Lloyd Wright, because when he was asked, do you believe in God? He said, I believe, I do, but I spell it nature. Now, an interesting phenomenon, talking about green and greening our lives. and our cities. The green returns now in New York, in Manhattan, even underground. And you'll see an example. This is just an experimental work. Perkins Eastman Architects Green Line concept would see New York's iconic Broadway converted into, sorry, I anticipated the next work will be about the green outside, indoors, underground. Now is about something else, an attempt, a proposal to transform Broadway into a linear park running from Columbus Circle to Union Square. That's about, I don't know, 80 streets or something like this. So you see, it's reclaiming the land for green, for nature. A very important avenue, Broadway Avenue, of course, which inspired even Piet Mondrian. But here it is an attempt to balance the excesses of vehicular movement with some sort of linear park. And you can see here, it's a green spine, so to speak, a green insertion into a city which misses. I mean, it needs as much green as possible. But it's not just that the proposal creates a park, but it also removes the functions of an important avenue which was dedicated mainly to the car, to the vehicle. Of course, the sidewalks were used as well, because in New York people still walk. You see on the left a major, almost outrageous proposal, but maybe very, very needed. So how would our cities look like if we begin to transform certain avenues into linear parks? It's the revenge of nature in a way. And now the subterranean garden that I mentioned before, an experiment to bring even flowers underground where there is no natural light, where there is no sunlight. So in a subway station, they created this, the first underground park. Look at it. And you know, you could, I guess, have some kind of picnic in the darkness. Well, not any longer darkness, because light is brought in some way underground. I understood that high technology is used here to make flowers even bloom. This is how it used to be, and this is how it is now, at least at this experimental level. But you see the exasperation where we arrive at, because we try to compensate many years in which we abuse nature, in which we killed nature, in which we banished nature. Now with a return of nature, even in the most improbable places, like the underground of Manhattan. I don't know. It's kind of strange now that we cannot neglect for too long certain realities, and the more we neglect them and the more we suppress them, the more they will return with an increased power to, as I put it, to revenge themselves. So move over, rats. This was an announcement relating to this experiment. Move over, rats. New York is planning an underground park. Move over, rats. New York is planning an underground park. That's because indeed the subway system in New York has many rats. They actually there for all to see. So now the plant, the fragile, the vulnerable plant, is attempting to fight with the misery that brought the rats there in the first place. Interesting. It shows again the New York spirit, the city that never sleeps. that it experiments. Yes, they make mistakes. Yes, they have incredible excesses. There are many things that are to be questioned, but we cannot question the vitality of this city that has the courage to even question itself. Back to architecture. I didn't know I'll have, anyway, the new building of Cooper Union. I mentioned Cooper Union where Scofidio taught for many years, maybe he still does. And Eisenman taught there, John Haydock was the dean, and Tom Main from Morphosis designed this building. It's an architecture school, a very famous one, Cooper Union, but this is the new building by, it was built a few years ago by Morphosis, by Tom Main, an architectural firm from the west side of the United States, Los Angeles. And then we have the museum by Sana, Kazuyo Sejima and her partner. It's perhaps not a glorious building, but anyway, it's built by a woman architect who received the Pritzker Prize herself. Here she is with her partner, whose name I continue to be unable to pronounce. And now we see a quotation from an important modern painter, Francis Picabia, who said, "New York is the cubist, the futurist city. It expresses in its architecture, its life, its spirit, the modern thought." And then there is this quotation from Simone de Beauvoir, "There is something in the New York air that makes sleep useless." There is something in the New York air that makes sleep useless. It's probably true. And this, unfortunately, picture and quotation with a low resolution, but I like the way what it says. Most cities are nouns, New York's a verb. Indeed, New York is a verb, continues to be a verb because of its verve, V-E-R-V-E, and its activism and its continuing searching for something else. Never give up on your dreams. I love this, and I think we should say the same thing to ourselves. Never give up on our dreams, not on your dreams, but on our dreams. And this is probably, I don't know, the last picture with, yes, there are excesses here, all these tall buildings springing to the sky. But something maybe similar happened also in San Gimignano in Italy some good centuries ago. Mountains in New York. This is a project, the project that would involve digging down to reveal the bedrock hidden. It's a project by two young architects who envisioned, you see, some kind of a return to some kind of a primeval, archaic past where Central Park disappears and reveals something that maybe it was there before it, and maybe a long time ago, some kind of primeval nature. It's another attempt to bring back what was lost. We saw the flowers blooming underground in the subway station. Now we see mountainous, natural structures and valleys and hills and lakes replacing the city hall, the Central Park. So it seems we are trying to recuperate something that was lost. And that is, to put it simply, nature. In even its most primal forms. And not accidentally, the cave returns in architecture also in an attempt to recuperate, to reclaim something that we forgot for a long time. Landlocked, the 100 feet deep mega structure would boast 1,000 feet high walls. That's very high, which would encase the 7 square miles of floor area. So I don't know about this, but that's what they proposed. You see, this prehistorical natural site they propose to create is surrounded by these reflecting walls that are, 1,000 feet high, quite high. But we are talking about New York City. So I guess they have to be high. I don't know. The Mammoth project was designed by Yitan Sun and Jian Shivu, who scooped first prize for the entry in the Evolo skyscraper competition. And that was it with New York is rising again. I don't know if you still have the patience and the power, and I myself am a little bit tired to also talk now about twisted architecture. So what should we do? I could engage in this subject as well, but are you up to it?
We are if you are.
Thank you for the, okay, I'll go for it. I'll try to defeat my, maybe even melancholia to an extent. Anyway, so we start with twisted architectures, slideshow from the beginning. And in a way, this subject complements the previous one. Bernini, San Pietro, of course, we are talking now about, almost 500 years ago, the great Baroque architect who, for the baldachin in San Pietro, you could say he almost used sophisticated digital technologies, but he didn't. It's very interesting, and it still haunts me what Bruce said, and we are talking about a very innovative architect who is almost nostalgic towards some form of past, anyway, I should not become nostalgic myself. So Bernini in San Pietro, and then you'll see the relationship between Bernini and what is happening today. I mentioned already that Frank Gehry found inspiration in Bernini, but it's not just Frank Gehry, also Mayan Song from Mad Architects. Now, the subject is twisted architectures. This is a photoshopped image, but it shows still, and it is an attempt to twist architecture, to dislocate it, to make it dynamic, even beyond the stringencies of reason. Now we have Meve de Reve proposing this tower, I think in Austria, yes, in Vienna. I don't know if it will be built, but they proposed it, and you can see it brings in the disturbance of twisting the building and distorting it almost at the point of breaking it. It's almost like the building is saying, well, I am going upwards, but I'm not so sure I should. But this kind of erosion, because this is what it is, an erosion takes place in various architectures. Some of the most interesting and celebrated deal with this kind of erosion. And I'm not sure in this case we could call it positive erosions. Like, for example, we could call something somehow similar in the Brion Cemetery by Carlos Carpa, which is a much smaller work, of course, in terms of dimensions. Now, Ingel, of course, with his park in Norway, this, not park, bridge, the Bridge Museum, which is very well crafted, but, well, as somebody told me, it's not a wise building, and maybe it is not, but you cannot be indifferent to it. It's interesting that exactly above the water, exactly above the middle of the river, it twists And in a certain way, I think he chose correctly, because what is the middle of a bridge? Is that point where you move from one state to another, from ascending to descending. It's almost like the middle life crisis of a human being. So I think there is some legitimacy to the act of twisting and distorting the structure exactly in the middle. Now, this is the project. It wasn't realized quite like this. The wall doesn't, the glass wall doesn't really become, you know, a glass terrace or roof, but it's very similar. I'm still haunted by the reticence of Bruce Danziger, the engineer who was with us, because he works for Ove Arup, for a famous, maybe the most famous engineering firm, and they build very innovative structures, but he seemed nostalgic and, you know, sentimental towards, I have to think about it. Anyway, we move forward with Ingalls and twisted architectures. Look at the plan. But maybe in that very distortion in the middle of the building is expressed some kind of doubting in a way. It's a Hamletian nature, Hamletian gesture in a way, you know, right there in the center. It could have crossed the bridge without any kind of hesitation or twisting or distortion, but it doesn't, it didn't. And Ingalls uses twisting all the time. I imagine that's him there, you know, trying to seduce more possible clients and explaining to them in a rhetorical and vivacious way how things are or should be or could be. He's a good salesperson, no doubt. Mad Architects, the Wood Museum in China, young architects. Ma Yan-song was the founder, and now he has some partners. So they built a building that is not dissimilar to the building we just saw by Ingalls. It's a large wood museum that was actually inspired by a piece of wood, and you are going to see it. You see, even the plans are not very different, truly, from what Ingalls did. This is the piece of wood that apparently inspired the design of this wood museum. Some cross sections. The twisting towers in Miami by Big again, Ingalls again, they are twisting themselves, all right. The structure is done in astonishing ways, you know. Where are the columns? He collaborated with an Italian engineer, and apparently was a good collaboration, and a very good engineer. I forgot his name. So this presentation is just a survey of twisting structures, twisting architectures. I kind of go quickly, maybe all of these projects deserve further study, but this is you know, an overview of this subject, of this theme, as expressed in architecture. I have in other presentations more detailed remarks on this building or on these buildings. Now in Vancouver, with the Vancouver house, which was finished kind of recently, and I liked his explanation. Ingalls said that it's like a building is like a curtain, you know, on the stage of a theater or an opera house, which which opens a little bit, so the stage opens up to the audience, and the audience is visually at least invited towards the stage. It's an interesting idea because it's the entrance into Vancouver, and yeah, it's done with an impressive technology, but the legitimacy of his gesture is not without being viable, I think. You can see the highway it's almost like the building is suggesting you are exiting the city or you are entering the city.
I knew about this project that they had some.
Pardon?
Yeah, they had some restrictions. That is why that the floor plan is so much smaller than what is happening above.
That's not what I read about him. That it's very possible, yes, there were some restrictions, but that his explanation was not so physical, was rather metaphysical. And you can find the quotation I was referring to on the web in various places. Yes, probably they had some restrictions, but and they were probably they had to be considered, but it was also the other explanation that I just mentioned. So what I'm trying to say is the decisions of an architect, if he is honest, are not always just functionalist and prosaic and countable. I mean, they are not just about so-called facts, but they are also about mental attitudes. I'm not trying to neglect the so-called physical constraints, but I don't think the architectural gesture can be justified or explained or sustained just with so-called facts, just with measurable data.
I was actually referring to their city design restrictions because they are only allowed to build a certain surface on the ground, and that is why that they while they elevated there, they grew in surface.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't think we can justify his architectural decision to twist the building just because the footprint of the building couldn't go beyond a certain number of square meters. No, I mean, he could have done a prism just like the one on the right. He didn't have to torment the building in this way. No, here it is also, again, the architect also has his own subjectivity, his aesthetics, his sense of, appropriateness in terms of also how the building looks like. So we have a twisting here that takes place vertically, while at the museum in Norway, it took place horizontally. It's the same architect, the same mental attitude, the same twisting, except that here is vertical and there it was horizontal. Now, in the forests of Norway, there were no urban restrictions. Why did he twist that structure? Here you could say, okay, maybe you are right. Maybe there were some constraints, but I think it's not just that. I'm not trying to dismiss the possibility that these constraints did exist, but I think it's also the mental, the emotional, positioning of the architect vis-a-vis his, his oeuvre, his work. Anyway, it's an interesting building. I'm sure it was done with effort, but well, he did it. But you do see somehow what he mentioned, that it's almost like a building that opens up, that doesn't block at the visual level the entrance into Vancouver, that it yeah, like a curtain, you know, it diverges part of what the stage has to offer. So the building is slightly insinuating the realities behind it, the urban realities. That's the city. Absolute Towers by Med Architects. I showed the Bernini with the baldachin in San Pietro. Now you have these young Chinese architects. Well, he studied at Yale in the United States. Then he worked a little bit for Zaha Hadid. And then he opened in China Med Architects. And these are the towers. With the same, I mean, it's the similarity to the to what Bernini did is almost unavoidable. It's amazing again that these architects were able to build something like this being very young. They are still young. And it's the same kind of attitude. You twist the prism, you twist you twist and distort reason, and there must be a reason why you do this. And I think the reason is a certain disbelief, a certain pessimism vis-a-vis the legitimacy of an exacerbated reason or Cartesianism. We also try to bring in something organic, something you know, more fluid, something more mysterious in a way. Now this is another elegant twist, kind of similar to. I mean, you can discern without difficulty some mannerisms in the case of Big and Ingalls. He is still able to reinvent himself and his company, but there are certain formal themes that are kind of obvious. This is just a project, was not built. Now Kop Himmelblau at BMW, big flamboyant building. Here we have this twisting all right again. Yeah. It's hard to do too much twisting for social housing. But if you build for BMW, of course you can, because you know, you are advertising the company through the building. And they have all the money in the world to build this extravaganza. But the quest for the vortex, for the turbulence, because that's what it is. It is an architectural turbulence, although it is a metallic one, and I have a problem here because they are cold. I also saw the Le Musée des Confluences in Lyon, also done by Kop Himmelblau. Yes, the volumes are interesting. Yes, the spaces are interesting, but the materials, the tectonics of the building is also cold, and it's some kind of a monotectonics. I mean, the shapes are organic, but the materials are not. The Martin Luther Church by Kop Himmelblau, and here there was a Romanian young architect who works for Kop Himmelblau, and he did the roofing, which is the most interesting part, at least in terms of visuality. I'm talking about Daniel Bojenaru. He did this through his high skills in the field of you know, scripting and programming. So this, look at the old church on the right, and look at, this is actually a church, but it is a turbulent church. It's a small church actually. I only have unfortunately just this picture now. But you can find a lot of pictures on the web. It's interesting that Wolf Prix, when he visited the school in Bucharest, for an interview published in South Korea, he was asked, what are the 5 architectural wonders or structures of the world that are a must see by any student of architecture and any architect? And he said, the pyramids, of course, the Egyptian pyramids, the Temple of Hera in Paestum, the Guggenheim by Frank Gehry in Bilbao, a plane he mentioned, Boeing, I don't know, I'm not very good, I think 747, so a plane. And the fifth one was this very church that he built in his native town in Austria. Now, when he visited the school in Bucharest, I asked him, what about Paestum? Because it's a very heavy building and very governed by gravitation. And he negated. He said, no, I never said Paestum, but that's what I read in that interview in South Korea. Because his idea is that architecture will become more and more so-called non-gravitational. I don't know about that, but yes, the temple in Paestum, that pre-Doric temple that moved Goethe, Winkelmann, Piranesi, and Louis Kahn is not so relaxed vis-a-vis gravitation, so to speak. Anyway, the central bank in Azerbaijan, again, Kop Himmelblau, but it's just a project. It was not yet done, as far as I know. Twisting here again. Then the book, another building by Ingalls in Vancouver. No, it's actually the same one, sorry, that we saw that was already built. Anyway, we move forward. Big designs with a twist in Miami. Raise the bar for. We saw this one. We saw it. It was built. And Rafael Moneo also built one. not Rafael Moneo. Sorry, Kengo Kuma built also in Florida 2 towers which are very similar to what Ingalls did. Strange, this Kengo Kuma, because he also designed and built the Olympic Stadium in Tokyo that Zaha Hadid claimed that he inspired himself heavily from her own project. I actually think the project by Zaha Hadid was superior in many ways to the one built by Kengo Kuma. Anyway, so new report ranks 28 twisting scrapers in the world right now and explains why there are many more to come. This is a building by SOM in Dubai, twisting itself all right. Then in Malmö, Santiago Calatrava in Sweden built some years ago this tower, which is not at all bad tower. I saw it. And it was built some years ago, but it's still convincing, and it's very well done. Twisting itself. Now, Studio Gang with Ginny Gang, Twisted Tower in San Francisco, which is built. Again, you kind of see a certain connection between the tower I presented in the first presentation by Frank Gehry. This one is contorted and twisting is different than what Frank Gehry did, but somehow pointing in the same direction. That architects are tired of the prismatic, placid, quiet, peaceful box, and they want some movement. So they invite Bernini to inspire them, I guess. The Diamond Tower in the Arab world, I don't know, this is too explicitly spiraling and twisting. UN, they proposed and they won, and I think they are going to build it in Melbourne, these 2 towers that are twisting, facing each other. I think is not a bad work, particularly because the twisting, that face that is vis-a-vis the other building is greened by the presence of the plants. So you have this rift between the 2 towers that allow for some kind of dialogue, which in this case is also warmed up by by the presence of plants, of vegetation. Next week, we will have a chance to have a presentation by a German architect who worked for UN for a number of years. I think 3 years he worked for UN, and he will make a presentation about his own work in Indonesia, where he works with his partner, an Indonesian architect. They met in the Netherlands, where they studied in an excellent school, Berlage Institute, in Rotterdam, and then she started to work for OM, Office of Metropolitan Architecture, Rem Koolhaas, and then Meve de Reve, and then West 8, while he worked for UN. So it will be interesting to, he probably didn't work for this project because this was done recently, but it's very nice that they want to make this presentation next week. And they have very interesting work built by them, by them in Indonesia. Now the Morphosis Tower by Tom Main and Morphosis, his company in Paris. Too bad it was not built, because I think it would have been an interesting addition to the landscape of tall buildings in Europe. It has two sides. It has this fluid side on one side, sorry for the repetition, and then in the back is Cartesian. So this shows something about the dualities of Tom Main. He's an interesting architect. He received the Pritzker Prize himself, and he is also very involved with SciArc, the school in Los Angeles that is run by Hernan Diaz Alonso. I think this building would have been a provocative addition to the tall buildings in Paris and in Europe in general. But for some reason, the construction didn't start. Now, a tower by Zaha Hadid, which is, I think, very elegant. And it found a balance between movement and stability. I think it's an elegant tower, and this is well done. I think it was finished after her death. It has a purity that is an elegance which is not so present in other works by Zaha. And it's not so extravagant, actually. It's more gentle in a way. An interesting tower in Panama with twisting and spiraling, all right, so explicitly, maybe too explicitly, but it was built. I wonder what Bernini would have thought if he saw these buildings. Now this is a project actually twisting itself, and you can see some connections also with the tower in Vancouver by Ingalls. So there is a certain generalized attitude vis-a-vis, tall buildings that are twisted, and in the case of the museum in the woods of Norway, also horizontally, not just vertically. But these buildings belong to the present. Well, I don't know. It's a present prior to the pandemic. I don't know if the climate change will accelerate, and if the pandemic continues to give us problems, it is possible that we might begin to twist less and less, because this pandemic does force us to reconsider many things, and so does the climate change. This was not built. So the report says the trend will be around for some time due to its green-friendly nature. I don't know. Twisting buildings can reduce energy consumed in the building via the more varied opportunities for the placement of windows. Just don't twist your neck looking up at them now. Anyway, this is the journalistic jargon. The truth is, I'm not so sure that you can justify such efforts, technological and financial efforts, with so-called sustainability and ecological concerns and so on. It surprises me again and again that the comments are still kind of ignoring the real reasons behind this twisting, which have nothing to do. I mean, come on, Ingalls is not interested in sustainability. And many of these people are actually, probably generally kind of indifferent. I don't think that this kind of twisting is reducing energy. I doubt it. Anyway, the singing ringing tree. This is a sculpture twisting itself, all right. Maybe singing as well through those pipes. It's not very tall. You'll see the human being near it, but it's an interesting structure. The dean at Columbia University in New York for many years, about 15 years, Mark Quigley, who was the curator of the exhibition Deconstructivism in Architecture, he wrote a manifesto called Towards Turbulence. Lately, was impossible for me to find it again on the web. Maybe he changed his mind. But what we do see here is some kind of turbulence. It's an architectural tornado or a sculptural tornado. It almost looks like human beings got tired of the simple answers of Cartesian obsession. So now they turn for some kind of compensation to tornadoes and tormented structures. This is a pavilion. This is a reticent twisting, if I can call it so. It's discreet, it's almost unnoticeable, but there is a twisting here too. It's a modest structure, but it is twisted. Now this is a more adventurous twisting in Tallinn, digital models and augmented reality. They created this architectural tornado kind of convincingly, I have to confess. It's not a big structure, but it is some kind of a tornado, architectural tornado, a vortex as well. Ron Arad, he couldn't miss the chance to assert himself also in this field in Tel Aviv for a tower twisted itself. Maybe not so spectacularly, but there is a twisting taking place here as well. Now this is Photoshop. But I think it's worth contemplating, why did an artist do something like this? And this is the last image of the presentation, is a distortion, a twisting of the facade of the Cathedral Notre Dame in Paris, done by the one who just talked to you for about 2 hours or so. Okay, I thank you, and that's it for today. Is
Thank you for your
anybody?
presentation.
Thank you. You are always generous. You always, I mean, I miss you when you are not present. You know, nobody is thanking me so clearly and so encouragingly as you do. So, Andre, please come at least towards the end of the presentation. So,
Yes, it was very interesting. Actually, I have a friend which is called, it's Mr. Kellerman from Timisoara, but he's actually conferencing in New York or in Switzerland. He's an artist, but some years ago he started to study together with some physicists. He created a computer-run device which produces various kind of interfering vibration in a mass of fluid, and he had obtained amazing shapes of twisting vortexes, which are almost similar to things which could be seen in embryos and in galaxies and stuff like that, like founding a geometry that is typical to the universe by large, you know. So maybe that kind of compared to the structure found by that guy, the twisting architecture we have seen seemed rather primitive, but maybe they signal a nostalgia for these primeval forms. Who knows?
yeah, yeah, well, yes. And there is much to say, I think. But anyway, I'm too tired now to say anything of an acceptable level of intelligence. I'll better shut up.
Very nice presentation.
Thank you.